If any of you are musicians, I'd love if you made a theme song for us. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Off the Rails, where I discuss whatever I want. This week, I am going to say color palette a whole bunch of times, because that is what I'd like to discuss with you guys, and actually just even selecting these images and looking at them all together, you can really see kind of another dimension of what that means to have different color palettes. Very cool. All right, so let's get into it. This is just a relatively quick pickings of some of your submissions from this past week's challenge, which was product photography, which I think is a good week to discuss color palette, and also a really good week to discuss story. So maybe I'll dip back into these photos in another week when we can kind of dive into story and all the facets of that subject. I was afraid it would do that. Just ignore that. Ignore my computer doing things. So, first of all, what is color palette? What I mean when I say color palette in this context is really like, is your background matching your subject? So, we have a Heineken, let's say, and we could put it anywhere. We could actually put it in the sand. I feel like that's probably been done before. We could put it on a table. We could put it on our kitchen counter. We could show it in a fridge. All of these are going to tell different stories, but more importantly, all of these are going to give you different color and a different overall palette in your frame from end to end. Now, what this person did is very clever, and they just matched the color completely through a green backdrop, and obviously that really makes this singular color pop. You can also do an opposite color, not that blue and red are specifically opposites, but this definitely creates extreme contrast and absolutely makes this subject pop more so than if it were just on a white background. A white background, though, is also a form of a color palette, in my opinion, at least for this conversation. Also something like almost a black and white palette, if you will. I think when done intentionally will really help to craft the story and make your subject pop. It was a little bit difficult to find examples that I could critique, because most of you actually did a really good job. So I have more examples of photos that I liked and color palettes that I think worked, and just a couple of examples that maybe I could critique. I did also pull out some examples of where I just thought the subject was too dark, because I thought maybe I would talk about that also. So I'm just going to kind of double up a little bit, talk a little bit about exposure, but more so I realized as I pulled the rest of these out, going through the 1,000 photos, is that color palette I think is better to zone in on. So we're just going to go through this one by one relatively quickly, and I think by the end we'll have a good idea of really what it means to just be mindful and intentional about your background. That's really all I'm asking here. All right, folks? Not so much. This person, when I say this person, I'm looking at the file name to see if there's a name. So if you do put your name either in the frame itself, of course, there's a watermark, but if you put your name in your file name, I can, talk to you like a person, not like a number. So this person, I think, did a really good job. We have a bit of a blue color palette there in the background, but it would have been nice if there were more, right? It does match nicely with the green, but incidentally, we have an example right next door here that kind of does a similar thing, but gets lower down. Lower down means we could see more of the sky. More of the sky means, in this situation, more blue. Notice this person also put their sunblock, their blue sunblock, on a blue chair. So I think this atmosphere, this environment, this surroundings all add to the color of the product in this situation. And I think this may be also a good time to just point out the exposure issue. And that's just, I mean, look, specifically in general, but specifically for product photography, you want your product to be brighter than the rest of the image. You want that to really pop. So you want your subject, in this case especially, to be brighter than the rest of the image. That's where you want the viewer's eye to look right away. So here, this is really cool. We have this kind of dark stained wood to complement coffee bean color. In fact, little known fact, some people have DIY wood staining that they make the stain with coffee beans. So very apropos earth matched tones here. And notice how the photographer, we have a name here, D. Conger, I believe that's Diane. Notice how she went end to end, right? Frame to frame. Although now that I'm looking closely, I see the tables gone there and a little bit there, but you still somehow have some brown, or maybe that's just part of the table. I'm not sure. But the color at least is going frame to frame. So if Diane here was zoomed out a bit and we saw, like, you know, something on the floor over here, or just even another component that's a different color, wouldn't have the same effect. This is a really nice brown, earthy color palette across the board, right? When I say color palette, you think of a painter, you know, with the beret and the mustache and the long cigarette. So he's holding this palette in his hand. It's called a palette. Painter's palette, maybe? And he's got a bunch of little colors, a bunch of little dots, and he takes his brush and he's dipping into each one. And what's interesting about painting is that there's the paint that's going onto the canvas, but there's also the palette that you're prepping, right? As a kid, I used to think that the palette just had all the colors and then you just chose whatever you wanted for the canvas, but it's not true. You're actually first kind of painting by putting your paint choices on your palette. And that's, like in this scenario, for example, your metaphorical palette will contain only these earthy colors. And then you would have variants of your earthy colors in your palette, and you would choose accordingly and create that scene. So that's what I mean by color palette, is if you were prepping your metaphorical palette, what colors would you be choosing? I think that's a really good way, if that made any sense to you. If it didn't, forget it. It's fine. But if it did make sense to you, I think that's a really good way of, being mindful and conscious of your environment before you take a photo, because then you can very quickly see an element that just doesn't fit. Let me see if I could even find one. You guys did just too good of a job. Did I even find like somebody's photo where the palette is off? Not really. Not really. You guys did a really good job. No, I don't have one example that I can actually show where it's like there's just a total outlying color. So good job. Yeah, even this. So let's imagine that there was, like, I don't know, a purple boat here, right in the sand. There was a purple boat just chilling there. So if that were the case, I would ask you, does that color belong on your palette? Like, if this was a painting and you were prepping, would you have put purple in this scene intentionally? And if the answer is no, then you should reframe your camera, right? Reframe the photo and get that purple out of the frame. So I hope you can kind of put together that whole visual that I that whole metaphorical visual that I've just put together for you. Cool. This person, Lori, has, again, some really nice browns to match this creamy Kahlua. This person, this maybe delves more into story than color, but I think they're one and the same. And it shows a really nice natural golden, setting sun setting. I did not mean to say setting twice, but that's just how language works sometimes. And another good example of just, little bit underexposed our subject. I'll just amp that up in a bit more of an exaggerated way so you can see. But yeah, we want to see the product. Similar to this one, this is really great. End-to-end green. You're holding vegetables. What better backdrop is there than its homeland of greenery? There is the issue, again, I will just pop this out in an extreme way so you could see. Your exposure is actually on the arm here. So I would even take another brush and just totally try and dampen this pretty harsh highlight. Okay, that's better. Let's see, before and after. You could actually see your eye actually jumps from the arm to our subject. I assume our subject are these root bulbs of something, some kale kind of thing, lettuce type of thing. I'm not sure what it is. Okay. But really good job with your color palette of this green earthy tone. So I think this is more of a critique of what is your subject. Just use another brush to show you how to amp these up. But I would argue, we'll just do something super extreme just to bring the light on there. But I would argue that the photos here may be more of the subject than the product itself. I don't know. It depends on what story you're trying to create here. But I think if I were the client, let's say, I think an argument could be made. Maybe the photos even could be in the forefront, in the foreground, and then the camera could just be, it's more like this is what you can get. But yeah, a little bit dark here. In fact, now I'm seeing that these people are holding cameras. I didn't even catch that whole meta part to the story. But yellow and blue, a really nice story and palette created with your background here. This is just a lovely, again, earthy kind of gray. This is just, it tells the story of the product. And that's what product photography is about. More important, that's what photography is about. The background and the colors will inform the story. The story will inform the whole photograph. Okay. Let's just go through these a little bit quicker because it's a little bit more the same. But high key, I think these three could even go together. Artificial backdrop, that's still, I think, very much a part of the palette. You're whittling down the colors here, obviously, to just, this section here. So you're just the oranges of your subject or product itself. And here just, you're essentially desaturating the rest of your frame, and then your palette is just what's left, which is the product. But that's fine. I think that's a very smart move. And again, taking away distraction, right? So here's a little bit similar, but you threw a purple artificial backdrop here, which I think blends really nicely with your background. This was an example of your product or your subject is a bit too dark. Should be a little bit brighter here. This person shot with a red background. I'm not saying you need to have a full-on background, but look at the impact that has on the story. And there's another one here. No, maybe I didn't pull it out. when you just have one color, it's like so much more obvious, right? Less obvious like this, but it's the same impact is what I'm trying to bring over. And this is like so clever. It looks like this is an actual wall. You could see some of the paint imperfection there. And you know, perhaps move the table over to the wall so you can have that color palette, so you could have that background help the story. It's a bit funny to me, the green and the purple, but it's, you know, it's a much more interesting story than if you just shot it wherever you happen to have placed it. Distant hills. Love it. Love it. Okay, again, like earthy backdrop. It's you know, I'm talking about color palette, but it really is delving into just general like story and context and framing and background, which I think all comes together. I mean, look how beautiful this, you know, foreground, what looks like mint leaves, matches your background, whatever that is, greenery. That's completely blurred out, but it's helping, you know, from frame to frame. We're seeing these blues and, these greens and yellows and, again, earth tones. And this is a really nice color palette. It matches from end to end, even though this is like much further away. I think that's a really nice example of just paying attention to color. So really nice job. Again, like nice earth, you know, wooden tones. That's completely, what's the word? Informing the story of the wine, right? If I were giving this video on story, I would bring up another wine photo that I saw of these two women like running through the field. Okay, that's a little bit of a departure because that's more about story, but this background and the color palette is informing this story of the frame, which is like a woodsy and oak feel. You start to think about, you know, how wine is stored in wine barrels and this and that, and that's probably all subconscious, but that is informing the story, the background, and it's part of that. It's from that wood, you know, palette, that color wood palette, the color of wood, the color palette of these earth tones. You know what I'm trying to say. This is really cool. I really like this. So yeah, just red background. Speaking of red, like the subtlety of these, I guess they're maybe lights, like little fairy lights in the background. But the red is somehow informing in some way the tones of the wood of the watch, at least for me. Because I'm into wood, I just kind of, you know, start to see the reddish tones. Not that this wood is red, but suddenly you feel like it's a reddish tone. This is just a beautiful color palette that you've designed here that I think really help to bring out almost the story of the subject. You created a completely different story of the subject, completely based on a very unique background that you've created here. Really well done. You don't have your name here, so I'm sorry I can't call you out by name, but I dig it. Likewise. Really, really nice. Oh my God, there's bees everywhere. I didn't even notice that. Tennessee honey. Holy cow. Let's not take a look at this very closely. What the heck? Is this real? Are these real bees? Who are you? How did you get this photo? Oh my God. Okay, we have our cover photo. Is this real? This bee looks a little fake. Just think a bit of an outline. Bit of a white outline here. All right, committee will have to examine this photo because it's a little bit too good. You have actual honey pouring down the bottle. Now I'm realizing this is a honey puddle. Okay, this shot is amazing. We're gonna have to do some research on how the heck you did this. That's pretty incredible. Talk about layers of storytelling, right? I mean, literally, I'm looking at this through with thumbnails, right? So I'm like, oh, cool, red. Oh, nice. They popped a yellow green background. Da da da. And then only once I popped it up in big did I notice that there were bees there, and then I realized it was Tennessee honey, and then I'm seeing the honey, and then I'm noticing the puddle. Wow. Okay. Cool. 2 Jack Daniels in a row. Well, sorry, Hansborough. Not seeing your first name, but there's no bees in this one. This one I think I pulled out to show also the exposure could be a bit brighter on your subject. Cool. Very similar to this guy. You know, also similar to this guy. We have some other wooden. You see these also like in a pairing, and you kind of also you get an additional context to it, which I think is really cool. So background, color palette. I mean, this is so cool. It's orange and yellow. Can maybe have zoomed in even more into the taxis. We don't need to see this clutter back there, but here we have end-to-end. Red matches perfectly, obviously, with our product. This one is beautiful color palette. I mean, it's informing so much of the story, as is this one. Whoo! Some really, really good photos this week. We don't want to leave this one out. Black Opium. Again, I'm using black and white in the realm of this color palette conversation, and I think this is beautifully done. You know, your color palette is black essentially. Obviously, it's going to be shades of black and gray. If it was black, we wouldn't be seeing anything. But that's, you know, talk about paying mind to your background. You see this black cloth that you put out really works beautifully. So, wow, a really nice selection of photos, I think. And I hope you guys, you know, got something out of this. And, you know, I just want to say, like, again, it's not product photography that I'm talking about here. In general, like, you're taking a photo of a person, right? What are they wearing, right? What color is their shirt? Do they have a bow in their hair? Okay, now what's behind them, right? Where are they sitting? Where are they situated? What's the story? So I think color palette is hugely important when it comes to painting, obviously, and when it comes to just general photographic composition from end to end. Your whole frame, right? What is your whole frame informing? My apologies for finding photos that were too good here. I really struggled to find a photo that was like, oh, okay, I could critique this. You know, here's what not to do. So if you guys could do me a favor and just be a little bit less good so that I can teach you more. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any other ideas, concepts, thoughts, suggestions, feedback of any kind, let me know in the comments below, and I'll ignore them. I'm just joking. I'll respond to them. Have a great week, everybody. Happy shooting.